Seems to me that, the AI is quite good at the woke stuff. And so, if you want to be a successful actor, you should be maybe a little bit racist or a little bit sexist or just really funny. And you won't have any risk of the AI replacing you. Everybody else. AI in 2023, 2024 is like the internet in 1999. It's really big. It's going to be very important. It's going to transform the world, not in 6 months, but in 20 years. And then there are probably all kinds of incredibly catastrophic approximations where, what businesses are going to make money, who's going to have the monopoly, who's going to have pricing power is super unclear. Probably, one layer deeper of analysis, if attention is all you need, and if you're not post-economic, you need to pay attention to who's making money. And in AI, it's basically one company is making, NVIDIA is making over 100% of the profits. Everybody else is collectively losing money. And so there's sort of you'd have to do some sort of, you should try to do some sort of analysis. Do you go long NVIDIA? Do you go short? Is it, my monopoly question, is it a really durable monopoly? And then it's hard for me to know because I'm in Silicon Valley and we haven't done anything in semiconductors for a long time. I think we're sort of sleepwalking into Armageddon with, the Ukraine and the conflict in Gaza are just sort of the warm-ups to the China-Taiwan war. And so if Trump can find a way to head that off, that would be incredible. If they don't go to war in 4 years, that will be better than I would expect, possibly.
In relation to Taiwan, if Trump called you and asked, should we defend it or not in this acute case, would you advise to let Taiwan be taken by China in order to avoid a nuclear holocaust and World War III? Or would you believe that we should defend it and defend free countries like that?
Well, I think you're probably not supposed to say.
Wait, but you're Peter Thiel.
I think there's so many ways our policies are messed up, but probably the one thing that's roughly correct on the Taiwan policy is that we don't tell China what we're going to do, and what we tell them is we don't know what we'll do, and we'll figure it out when you do it, which probably has the virtue of being correct. And then I think if you had a red line at Quemoy, Matsu, the island, 5 miles off the coast of China, that's unbelievable. If you say we want some guardrails and we won't defend Taiwan, then they'd get invaded right away. So I think the policy of not saying what our policy is, and maybe not even having a policy, in some ways is relatively the best.
Yeah,
I think anything precise you say, that's going to just lead to war right away.
But what do you believe? Worth defending or not worth stirring the conflict? Democracy in this tiny island, worth going to war over or not? According to Peter Thiel,
it's not worth World War III, and I still think it's quite catastrophic if it gets taken over by the communists.
How does the world?
Those can both be true.
How does the world divide if we end up in heightened escalation? Is China, Russia, Iran friends? Is that an axis that forms? Think out the next decade in kind of your base case, and
I don't know what happens.
Estimate how the world divides.
I don't know what happens militarily if there's a China-Taiwan invasion. I mean, maybe we roll over. Maybe it escalates, all the way to nuclear war. Probably it's some very messy in between thing, sort of like what you have in the Ukraine. What I think happens economically is very straightforward. I think basically, you have with Russia and Germany, you had one Nord Stream pipeline, and we have the equivalent of 100 pipelines between the U.S. and China, and they all blow up. Now, I met the TikTok CEO about a year ago, and maybe I wouldn't have said this now, but what I told him and what I felt was very honest advice was, you don't need to worry about the U.S. We're never going to do anything about TikTok. We're too incompetent. But if I were in your place, I would still get the business out of China. I would get the computers out, the people out. I'd completely decouple it from ByteDance because TikTok will be banned 24 hours after the Taiwan invasion. And if you think there's a 50-50 chance this happens, and that will destroy, 100% of the value of the TikTok franchise.
What was his reaction?
He said that they had done a lot of simulations, and there were a bunch of companies in World War I and World War II that managed to sell things to both sides.
He doesn't seem so bright to me. Do you think he's... honestly, what was your take on him?
He didn't disagree with my frame, and so I always find that flattering if someone basically agrees with my framing. So he seemed perfectly bright to me, even though
game theory,
not
but
correct.
Game theory.
But
a lot of bright people.
But Peter, I saw you give
wrong about things,
I saw you give a talk last summer with Barry Weiss, and you talked about this decoupling should be happening. You weren't saying should. You were recommending that every industry leader consider decoupling from China. I think your comment was it's like picking up nickels in front of a freight train. Do you remember saying that?
I think there are a lot of different ways in which businesses are coupled to China. There were investors that tried investing. There are people who try to compete within China. There are people who built factories in China for export. There are different parts of that worked to varying degrees. But I certainly would not try to invest in a company that competed domestically inside China. I think that's virtually impossible. I think it's probably quite tricky even to invest in Chinese businesses. And then there is sort of this model of building factories in China for export to the West, and it was a very big arbitrage. These things do work, Can
we talk about technology? You have this. You have a speech where you talk about some of the misguided things we've done in the past in the name of technology, and use like big data as an example of that. What is AI?
Oh man, that's sort of a big question. I always had this riff where I don't like the buzzwords, and machine learning, big data, cloud computing. I'm going to build a mobile app, bring the cloud to. If you have sort of a concatenation of buzzwords, my first instinct is just to run away as fast as possible. It's some really bad groupthink, and for many years, my bias is probably that AI was one of the worst of all these buzzwords. It meant, the next generation of computers, the last generation of computers, anything in between. So it's meant all these very different things. If we roll the clock back to the 2010s, probably the AI, to the extent you concretize it, I would say the AI debate was maybe framed by the two canonical books that framed it. There was the Bostrom book, Superintelligence 2014, where AI was going to be this superhuman, super duper intelligent thing. And then the anti-Bostrom book was the Kai-Fu Lee 2018 AI Superpowers. You can think of the CCP rebuttal to Bostrom, where basically AI was going to be surveillance tech, face recognition, and China was going to win because they had no qualms about applying this technology. And then if we now think about what actually happened, let's say with the LLMs and Chat GPT, it was really neither of those two. And it was this in-between thing, which was actually what people would have defined AI as for the previous 60 or 70 years, which is passing the Turing test, which is the somewhat fuzzy line. It's a computer that can pretend to be a human, or that can fool you into thinking it's a human. And even with the fuzziness of that line, you could say that pre-ChatGPT it wasn't passed, and then ChatGPT passed it, and that seems very, very significant. And then obviously it leads to all these questions: what does it mean? Is it going to complement people? Is it going to substitute for people? What does it do to the labor market? Do you get paid more?
If you take
do you get paid less? So there are all these questions, but it seems extremely important, and it's probably certainly the big picture questions, which I think Silicon Valley is always very bad at talking about, is like what does it mean to be a human being?
Right.
Sort of the stupid 2022 answer would be that humans differ from all the other animals because we're good at languages. If you're a 3-year-old or an 80-year-old, you speak, you communicate, we tell each other stories. This is what makes us different. And so yeah, I think there's something about it that's incredibly important and very disorienting. You know, the question I always have the narrower question I have as an investor is sort of how do you make money with this stuff? And
how do you make money?
It's pretty confusing, and I think I don't know. This is always where I'm anchored on the late '90s as sort of the formative period for me. But I keep thinking that AI in 2023, 2024 is like the internet in 1999. It's really big. It's going to be very important. It's going to transform the world, not in 6 months, but in 20 years. And then there are probably all kinds of incredibly catastrophic approximations where, what businesses are going to make money, who's going to have the monopoly, who's going to have pricing power is super unclear. Probably, one layer deeper of analysis, if attention is all you need, and if you're not post-economic, you need to pay attention to who's making money. And in AI, it's basically one company is making, NVIDIA is making over 100% of the profits. Everybody else is collectively losing money. And so there's sort of you'd have to do some sort of, you should try to do some sort of analysis. Do you go long NVIDIA? Do you go short? Is it, my monopoly question, is it a really durable monopoly? And then it's hard for me to know because I'm in Silicon Valley and we haven't done anything in semiconductors for a long time. So I have no clue.
Do you, let's de-buzzword the word AI and say it's a bunch of process automation. Let's just say that's version 0.1, where brains that are roughly the equivalent of a teenager can do a lot of manual stuff. Have you thought about what it means for, 8 billion people in the world if there's an extra billion that necessarily couldn't work, or like whether that in political or economic terms?
I don't know. I don't know if this is the same, but this is, the history of 250 years, the Industrial Revolution, what was that it adds to GDP, it frees people up to do more productive things. Maybe there was a Luddite critique in the 19th century of the factories that people were going to be unemployed and wouldn't have anything to do because the machines would replace the people. Maybe the Luddites are right this time around. I'm probably pretty skeptical of it, but yeah, it's extremely confusing. Where the gains and losses are. There probably are. There's always sort of a hobby. You can always just use it on your hobby horses. So I don't know my anti-Hollywood or anti-university hobby horse is that it seems to me that the AI is quite good at the woke stuff. And so if you want to be a successful actor, you should be maybe a little bit racist or a little bit sexist or just really funny, and you won't have any risk of the AI replacing you. Everybody else will get replaced, and then probably Claudine Gay, the plagiarizing Harvard University president. The AI is going to the AI will produce endless amounts of these sort of, I don't even know what to call them, woke papers, and they were all already sort of plagiarizing one another because they were always saying the same thing over and over again.
They were using their own version of
the AI is just going to flood the zone with even more of that, and that. I don't know. Obviously, they've been able to do it for a long time, and no one's noticed. But I think at this point, it doesn't seem promising from a competitive point of view. But
what are the areas?
It's obviously my hobby horses, so that's maybe just wishful thinking on my part.
What are the areas of technology that you're curious about? That your mind is like, wow, this is really. I have to learn more, pay attention.
I always think you want to instantiate it more in companies than things, or if you ask sort of like where is innovation happening? In our society, and it doesn't have to be this way, but it's mostly in a certain subset of relatively small companies where you have these relatively small teams of people that are really pushing the envelope. And that's sort of what I find inspiring about venture capital. And then obviously you don't just want innovation; you also want it to translate into good businesses. But that's where it happens. It doesn't happen in universities. It doesn't happen in government. There was
Peter, three of your collaborators, longtime collaborators, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Sam Altman are arguably the three leading AI language model leaders. Which one is going to win? Rank them in order and tell us a little bit about each. Peter said he would answer any question.
I said I would take any question. I didn't say to answer any question.
You said you would honestly. You said today you felt extremely honest and candid. So let's.
But I've already been extremely honest and candid. So I think I can stop here.
Quote him out.
It's whoever I talked to last.
Okay. Well, okay. Why don't you?
They're all very, very convincing people. So
Great answer.
I don't know.
Well, maybe talk a little bit about each individual.
I talked to Elon a while ago, and it was just how ridiculous it was that Sam Altman was getting away with turning OpenAI from a nonprofit into a for-profit. That was such a scam. If everybody was allowed to do this, everybody would do this. That it has to be totally illegal what Sam's doing, and it shouldn't be allowed at all. And that seemed really, really convincing in the moment. And then sort of half an hour later, I thought to myself, but actually, it's been such a horrifically mismanaged place at OpenAI with this preposterous nonprofit board they had. Nobody would do this again. And so there actually isn't much of a moral hazard from it. So, but yeah, whoever I talk to, I find very convincing in the moment.
Will that space just get commoditized? I mean, do you see a path to a monopoly there?
Well, again, this is again where you should attention is all you need. You need to pay attention to who's making money. It's NVIDIA. It's the hardware, the chips layer, and then that's just what we it's not what we've done in tech for 30 years.
Are they making 120% of the profits?
I think everybody else is losing money collectively. Yeah, everyone else is just spending money on the computer. So it's one company that's making. I mean, maybe there's a few other people that are making some money. I mean, I assume TSMC and ASML, but yeah, I think everyone else is collectively losing money.
What do you think of Zuckerberg's approach to say, I'm so far behind, this isn't core to my business, I'm going to open source it? Is that going to be the winning strategy? Handicap that for us.
Again, I would say my big qualification is my model is AI does feel uncomfortably close to the bubble of 1999. So we haven't invested that much in it, and I want to have more clarity in investing. But the simplistic question is who's going to make money? I think a year ago, 2 years ago, in retrospect, NVIDIA would have been a good buy. I think at this point, it's sort of too obvious that they're making too much money. Everyone's going to try to copy them on the chip side. Maybe that's straightforward to do. Maybe it's not. But that's, I'd say probably you should if you want to figure out the AI thing, you should not be asking this question about Meta or OpenAI or any of these things. You should really be focusing on the NVIDIA question, the chips question, and the fact that we're not able to focus on that tells us something about how we've all been trained. I think NVIDIA got started in 1993.
Yeah.
I believe that was the last year where anybody in their right mind would have studied electrical engineering over computer science. Right, 94, Netscape takes off, and then, yeah, it's probably a really bad idea to start a semiconductor company even in 93, but the benefit is there was going to be no one would come after you. No talented people started semiconductor companies after 1993 because they all went into software.
Score their monopoly power.
I think it's quite strong because of this history that I just gave you, where none of us know anything about chips, and then I think the risk. It's always if attention is all that you need, the qualifier to that is, when you get started as an actress, as a startup, as a company, you need attention. Then it's desirable to get more, and at some point, attention becomes the worst thing in the world. And there was the one day where NVIDIA had the largest market cap in the world earlier this year, and I do think that represented a phase transition. Once that happened, they probably had more attention than was good.
Hey, Peter, as we wrap here, your brain works in a unique way. You're an incredible strategist. You think, very differently than a lot of the folks that we get to talk to. With all of this, are you optimistic for the future?
I always push back on that question. I think extreme optimism and extreme pessimism are both really bad attitudes, and they're somehow the same thing. Extreme pessimism, nothing you can do. Extreme optimism, the future will take care of itself. So if you have to have one, it's probably you want to be somewhere in between, maybe mildly optimistic, mildly pessimistic. But I believe in human agency,